Is milling a mean strategy? How does chess theory relate to Commander? And this week, we're drafting Planeswalker Battle Royale. I'm Levi.
I'm Jacoby.
And I'm Joe.
And this is the Thought Vessel Show. Let's jump right in.
Have you ever seen a situation where someone just had the most unreasonable amount of anger for a reasonable situation?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think anyone who's worked in retail at any point in their life has probably had a couple of these stories.
Yeah, I've experienced a few people.
Just working in the food industry, you see it a lot. But the most recent example that I have was when I worked an anime convention in Alabama. Shout out to Comic-Con.
Hey.
And we had the Has-Been Hotel guests from the Amazon series. They were widely popular. When they had their very first panel of the entire weekend, the line for that filled up an entire floor. So much so that because of fire code, we had to cap it off. Someone, after our end-of-line staff member was, turning people away and had turned like 25 people away before they came up, had to deal with the most Karen of Karens. You could just let me in. The end of the line's right there. Are you shouting at me? They are shouting to the rest of the people saying that the line is capped and not directly at them. My God, some people are entitled.
That is a particularly special level of narcissism. Because like if the fire inspector comes in and shuts the whole convention down, you're not going to be able to go to that panel anyway. So like the person's only doing their job.
You never know when the fire marshal is going to show up because they walk in plain clothes and just walk around.
Yep.
Absolutely. What was yours, Jacoby?
We had a gentleman at our local game store freak out at the store for not having singles.
Okay.
And this is like, they're like, why don't you have X, Y, Z? Like some cards you expect some shops to have. But this guy got so unreasonably belligerent. They were like, you don't want our money, blah, blah, blah. Like they were getting upset at a guy standing behind a counter going, I'm sorry, we don't have a thing. It was like, I think a few shocks, a triome or two, and some swords.
Sure.
He's like, I can't believe you don't have these, blah, 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 blah. Like everyone has these cards and just literally lost their absolute mind.
Was this like a PTQ day or was it just like a normal Wednesday or whatever?
It was like a generic Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
That is...
And this was before everyone else showed up. I showed up early at like 11 o'clock. This guy came in at noon and I could hear them from the back of the store.
Also, like the particular LGS we're talking about, the employees that are working there, they're very knowledgeable, skilled, good with people. It's hard to find that at some in particular LGSs because like when you have the expertise of Magic the Gathering, sometimes like there is a hindrance, whether it's social skill or something like that, where they do an excellent job, but like the person who's doing that is not called the shots as far as the inventory is concerned. If you don't have anyone like going in and buying singles or trading that in, you just don't have that.
And on top of that, like you said, the staff that's there, every single one of them is the most laid back, relaxed, just like, yeah, I'll help you out. What can I do for you? None of them have any type of attitude except for one guy once, but he fixed himself real good. He was a good guy after that.
I mean, all I could say to that situation is, damn, Jackie, I can't control the singles.
Sounds
I
about
respect
right.
it because it's a Wisconsin show, but still. Mine was from my days working at Academy Sports. For those of you who do not know, Academy Sports is like a Dick's Sporting Goods, but it also carries like lower quality items as well as a higher quality. So there's like a price range that you can fit into. So if you want to buy like a baseball glove for $20, you can. It's usually more in the South. They're expanding out, but I did like my time with the company. Like when I was a teacher, I worked there as a second job. So I had no ill will towards the store. I loved my time when I was there. But it was around Christmas, so we had like some extra stuff in the store that we normally don't sell. One of them was a kind of mini four-wheeler that, like a kid would ride. And we had this person come in very eccentric, like wanting to really jazz it up for his kid's Christmas. And he wanted this particular item, but he didn't want the one that was on display because he wanted the box. Okay, sure. We had one in the back that was on the floor and a couple that were like up at the top. So we brought out the one that was on the floor, had like a minor dent in the corner of the cardboard because this stuff's been on semi trucks. Like it's going to be scratched up. He's like, I don't want that one because the box is damaged. I want one without a damaged box or less damage. So I take it to the back and I have a manager reach out because I didn't have my forklift certification, like to get one up from the higher up. And she's like, no way in hell am I going to do that. You can bring that back out to them. So I keep in mind, this is the same box. I maybe moved it slightly. I bring it back out to the person. I'm about to say, like, I'm sorry, sir. I'm gonna make something up, like we're out of stock or whatever. He's like, oh, that's much better, thank you. He immediately is like, yeah, that's a much better box. It's the exact same box I previously had. We pays for it. We help him outside because when it's in a heavier item to prevent liability, we'll load it up to your car for you. He like daps me up and like slips like $2 single bills as a tip in my hand. And like we're not supposed to take tips, but I'm like, I really don't want to offend this guy by telling him no. So I just like pocketed the $2 real quick and then he drove off. But like the fact that he's like, oh, that's a much better box when it was the exact same box the whole time.
Did a full 360 move, put the mustache on the box? It's a different box.
Exactly.
I've watched that happen. I shit you not. I've been behind the counter when this was done with a guy getting graded Pokemon cards. Literally pulls out like a Squirtle. Guy's like, this is all f***ed up. Like the centering's blah, 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 blah. And then guy hands me the Squirtle. I go back. It's our only Squirtle. I just put it back on the counter. I'm about to sell him. It's our only Squirtle. I don't bother because he pulls out his little observer thing, says, yes, this is much better. And then eventually it's just like, yeah, I want this one. It's better than your last one.
Wild.
It's the exact same Squirtle.
And just the hills that people die on is just fascinating to me.
That literally reminds me of the story of wine and how wine experts actually don't know what they're talking about.
It's crazy. Like people will put in like Walmart wines and they'll make a fraudulent like vineyard that it's from. And they'll go in these competitions and they'll win.
It's kind of like when the Uber Eats thing where people were like ordering pizza from like Pachuli's and it's just Chuck E. Cheese pizza.
Jesus. I love it.
Yeah, no, literally Chuck E. Cheese rebranded on Uber Eats to sell pizza to adults from their storefront.
I can't even be mad at the hustle. That's respect.
I can be mad. I will be mad. That's dirty.
I mean,
Capitalism
the pizza's
is
dirty,
capitalism.
but it's technically in health code.
Capitalism is capitalism.
Ugh.
Ain't that the truth? But that does transition us into our Am I the Arch Enemy? First one coming off of our Chicago trip. Joe, take it away.
Am I the arch enemy hole? EDH edition. So I was playing Commander tonight, and game 1 ended for me because on turn 6, the red-green deck was able to swing 40 with a Siege Behemoth at me. Gruul deck's gonna gruul.
Gruul deck gruul.
I congratulated him on a success, and game 2, I whipped out my Scarab God deck that I just built yesterday. I won via Scarab God's upkeep ability and having like 30 zombies via Undead Alchemist. And I did it while getting mana screwed. Up until the last 2 turns, I'd been operating on 4 mana. What a champ. And while I had milled one guy for like 2/3 of his deck, I didn't win a mill victory. They whined and moaned about how much of an a-hole I was for shutting the game out so hard because I milled so many cards. I remarked I had made a comeback victory, and I didn't complain when turn 6 green deck got out Vorinclex and had half a bajillion mana.
Might be a slight exaggeration. Probably only a quarter bajillion.
Yeah, but also he was playing the jerk card for jerks, Vorinclex.
He did nothing wrong. He just wants to double his lands.
Their response was that I won because I milled them, which makes me a jerk because mill is a denial strategy. He said, how am I supposed to win when half my deck is in my graveyard? I told him that mill doesn't deny you cards, usually, and in fact, more often can empower your opponents. I told them that the cards that got milled are just potential cards, and not like I'm taking them away from them, and that's the hill I'll die on. They told me, then go die on that hill, you'll never change our minds, and refuse to play with me again. That's Jesus. That's a lot.
That is wild.
Oh, I'm gonna get into this one.
I felt bad because we only played 2 games, and I really wanted to break in my new decks, but also am seriously offended at their response to mill. It's not the first time I've dealt with mill hate. Scarab God is my only mill deck at the moment because of this, and I want to be able to play the strategy without being accused of being a jerk. What I'm getting at is, A, was I an arch enemy for bringing a mill deck and standing up for mill as a legitimate strategy that is frequently a double-edged sword? And B, what can I do to change people's opinions on mill so I don't have to decide between retiring a deck that I just built or not playing with these friends again?
All right.
For starters, get yourself some new friends.
I'm gonna twist this mic and go f yourself, people. The mill stacks is fine. If you're gonna sit here and hate a strategy, the answer is get fucking good, kid.
And especially because milling cards is still reasonable within the game. It's just another part of the game. Embrace the suck.
Also, like, there are strategies. Like, what happens if somebody is holding a hand like a Primeval's Glorious Rebirth and then just puts all that stuff back on the field, or any other kind of like recursion strategy? Like, there are some decks that capitalize on being milled. Like, this does happen, and it is only a potential card.
And there's also just the fact that sometimes the milling gets you the card you actually wanted. Oh, I milled your land. That's on me. I'm sorry. Top decks and Nykthos.
So I've got a number of points here. I'm gonna speed run some of these. Point number 1: if you hate a strategy, eat shit and die. That is your problem, and you cannot make that someone else's issue because they play that deck.
I will add a caveat. You can absolutely hate it, but do not say that that person cannot play it.
Yeah, eat shit. Like I said, eat shit and die. Like, that's on you to figure out how you deal with against that.
I don't think, for example, if I'm playing at the bar and I know someone's about to play like a hard storm deck that's going to take like 20 to 30 minute turns, I might at the beginning of the game say like, hey, I don't want to deal with that. I've had people, I just built a 12th Doctor Invisor deck. It's copying people's stuff and then giving them a copy of it, but I have two. Kind of like a reverse group hug type of situation. It's not super powerful, but there are some times because I'm dealing with a lot of cards that are in exile that I need to play on that turn or I don't get to use them at all, and I'm using someone else's stuff. So sometimes some of the turns can be a little bit more long-winded. There are people that just will tell me like, hey, I would prefer if you played something else. And that's totally fine. I'll put it away. I'll pull out a different deck. But I think if you're in the game, I understand like top decking and like putting a win condition of yours in the graveyard. That can suck. Sure. I'll give you that. It doesn't feel good, but it's not a backbreaking thing. This wasn't a Bruvac Maddening Cacophony 2-card combo. Everyone's dead. Like, it wasn't even a victory through milling.
Though I will say it is impressive that he got 2/3 of an opponent's deck into the graveyard off of what doesn't seem like to be a mill strategy. It's just kind of incidental mill.
And I will say this, like, yes, you have every right to be as mad as you want about things because you're a human being. However, my statement and the reason I say eat shit and die and why I say go f yourself is because the way this person came at it, it was like, no, never do that again. I hope everyone hates your guts. I hope you fucking get hit by, like, this guy came at him with another aggression that is just not acceptable, period.
Then die on that hill.
And then, yeah.
We're going to edit this so much.
Yes, no, like, there have been
Die.
so many F-bombs dropped.
Go f yourself. No, I'm keeping it in. Go to the person who said this mean shit to this guy. Go f yourself.
And just when I was
Jacob,
like, hey,
angry.
we should leave the swear words in to sound more authentic, and then we have this. And Spotify's gonna be like, Levi, what are you doing?
But yeah, so
I will also correct a point. Apparently, it was in fact intended for a mill. That wasn't in part of for bringing a mill deck. He in fact describes as a
My
mill
guess,
deck.
it was Scarab got here, so my guess is he's trying to mill everyone's stuff and then reanimate the good stuff.
Yeah, because like I would want to do that. Hell, I would build a Scarab God deck that might actually be part of the 32.
Yeah, I would assume so as well.
the other little caveat is with these people he's playing against. If you're playing green, you can just stomp him to death. If you're playing red, you could just put all your stuff in exile, cast it, and he can't mill it anyways. Whatever. You're playing blue, you can counter anything you want. You can also mill, you can also draw, whatever. Like, every color has some kind of solution to a mill strategy that exists. You're not just boned because, oh no, I'm green and there's nothing I will ever do. Like, that's not a factor
Well, I
in
mean,
Magic.
it also goes back to people just hate not having access to their stuff. It's that I wanted to play with that. Why are you putting it there? No, it needed to go here. I'm pointing at my hand and pointing at a invisible graveyard.
Similar to, the story I told about Quincy when we were at the Chicago Con. If my deck is not built to handle something that is a viable threat towards that strategy, it's kind of on me to figure out a solution to that. Or if it's something I can't deal with, then if it comes up, it comes up. But putting the responsibility for your deck shortcomings on your opponents is it's a really crappy thing to do to people.
I don't even think that it's doing the shortcomings on them. They're just seeing thing get milled, mill bad,
Usually when I see that, it's because the deck was like a hard combo deck. And like its only way of victory is through that combo, and then the pieces get thrown away. So you have no way to win. If it was or I guess rather my fiance's human tribal deck, that the whole deck is doing the same thing. So it really doesn't matter how deep you mill me, because I'm just going to play humans and hit you, and then draw more cards to play more humans and hit you until everyone's dead. So it does not matter how far you mill me or what you mill me, because it's all doing the same thing.
It's in that same strain of just how I've developed as a Magic player and how I used to be very vehement against certain strategies because I thought that they were just unfun strategies for unfun jerks. And as I've played more and played more, I've come to understand that just because I don't like those strategies, I can still work around them.
The key caveat to take away from this is we here all want to tell you experience everything. If you hate it, sure, but you still need to experience and get over it.
At the end of the day, I think we're in agreement here. Person, not the arch enemy.
Yeah, not the arch enemy. And don't change people's opinions. Find better friends.
Put on your boxing gloves.
All right, moving to our next topic today. What we're going to be talking about in Penny for Your Thought Vessel is a concept that's near and dear to my heart. It is chess theory, and more specifically, how we can relate chess theory to Commander. Chess being one of the more popular board games of all time, it had a lot of different rules for different parts of the globe that it was at the time. Whenever we were able to standardize all the rules globally, we were able to develop theories and build up from there to a point that we actually have supercomputers that are capable of beating humans 10 times out of 10 now. With that, there is different principles of this. I'm going to be writing an article on our blog as well, The Thought Vessel, that's going to come out in the same week as this particular podcast. If you want any additional information, it'll be there as well. The one thing we're going to be talking about today is the different phases between the opening, middle, and end games, or as they're referred to in Magic, development, parity, and winning / losing. First, with this one caveat here, we're going to be looking at casual first, and then we're going to see how this compares in CDH. So we're going to touch on casual. First thing, of course, we're looking at opening. So this is going to be your developmental stage. This is the first few turns of the game. There should not be much of an expectation for players to be attacking people with like significant damage or repercussions. Most people at this point are just trying to cast their rocks, cast their artifacts, stuff like that.
The only notable exception is like a Rograk, or not Rograk, but Rograk as well, because like zero cost commander. There is also Ragavan, which some people use as ramp because it just makes a treasure, even if they don't use the card that they get off of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you see that more of that in CDH than you do casual, on average, just because it's a higher price card and it's less good in games that have an expectation of going longer, because you're more likely to have like a 2/2 blocker on the field that's very expendable to block a Ragavan in a casual game than you do in a CDH.
Yeah, but some people will have that errant Ragavan because they pulled it from a pack and they want to play with it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have it in Joda, but also we make it like a 7/7. So it's a lot harder to just chump block and kill off the board.
Which, by the way, I've heard that there was a top 8 Joda in a CDH tournament.
I need to see the deck list. That seems fun.
Right?
Oh,
That seems real
Top 8 Joda.
Yeah.
Was it just like a
No.
stacks build? Or?
I have no idea. I need to... I talked to them on a stream, but like it was wild.
We're looking at this after the show. I'm hyped.
I'm disgusted as I sit here holding my Slicer CEDH deck. Disgusted by your Joda deck.
The most popular commander to bring people into CDH.
Oh, that would be so much fun in a pod. Having Slicer and Joda in the same pod and just be like, well, have fun. Hands you my Slicer.
I mean, it gets big.
He gets
real
big,
big.
and definitely is going to kill somebody.
And now we've gotten off topic entirely.
No, it's fine.
I can't
So
believe
back-
you're the one bringing us back to the rails. Of all the people to bring us back to the rails.
Well, I got off the rails with this topic, so I'm bringing us back to the rails. It's funny.
So that being said, go ahead and talk about middle.
So the middle game, this is where attacks matter. Holding up blockers is going to be important as well. You can't just swing out at somebody because you might get hit by all 3 players and lose a substantial portion of your life. It's in the comparison it's the parity maker or breaker, where everyone's kind of on the same even keel. Maybe there's one person that's a little bit higher that everyone's trying to bring back down, but we're in this kind of building up the trenches kind of a situation. And of course, these are going to be cards that where like removal is going to be a lot more important and things like that. And then you get towards your end game. This is going to be where if I pass the turn, there's not a guarantee that it's going to come back around to me. Like board states are scary enough that like if a Crater Elf comes down, if a combo pops off, like I could very much lose the game where having your bombs or having like an ideal counterspell in hand is going to be a lot more important than it is going to be to try to counter someone's mana rock in the early game, unless you have like a very important reason to do so.
And this is usually the phase where I see a whole lot of people drop their card draw pieces in casual, because after the building phase, after the first few turns, you need to rebuild that hand so that you can get that advantage on the board. So you'll usually see like your Guardian projects, heuristic studies, other card draw engines that are not coming to mind.
But I think, you know, even your casual 4 mana draw 3 harmonize concentrate kind of effects in the middle game, when it's everyone's trying to break parity and kind of pull ahead, having those cards in hand, especially in the event of like a board wipe that kind of resets where we are in the game progression, is going to be very, very helpful, because you're able to rebuild and have more options at your disposal. Versus if you get board wipe and the only card in your hand is a Crater Hoof, congratulations, you can swing out with a 6/6 trampler with haste. Great, but that's probably not going to kill anybody.
Yeah. Especially with not a developed board. You cannot get Swole Guinea Pig of Doom if you only have the Guinea Pig of Doom.
Guinea pig of doom.
Another thing to kind of look at is there is a different expectation as well, where more aggressive decks are trying to get into these different phases faster than others. So if I get to the middle game and I'm building up my board and I'm needing to worry about blockers and trying to get my key draw and stuff into phase while you're still playing mana rocks, I'm going to get a lot of extra hits in. I'm going to have a lot more card advantage before you're able to get set up. So by the time you get to the middle game, I might be looking towards getting to my end game and finding a closer.
And with this concept of, you know, how you transition, some people get really lost in the sauce at deck building, where their focus is to get to that end game so fast. They sacrifice a lot of other portions. A lot of the CDH brain, in my mind, takes place with people who are not CDH prepped, but they build their deck like it. So they got 23 lands and a whole lot of like cheap or free rocks, thinking that they're going to get to the late game faster, not realizing that they don't know how to play like that, and then not transitioning through the actual middle part. They're just thinking beginning end. It's important to always have your middle game as a part of the plan.
It's that kind of mentality that punts games for that player and other players at that table.
And I think that this is why I don't really like Chrome Mox and Mox Diamond as much as other people do in the casual perspective, because sacrificing a card in your hand, especially early game, you might be able to get your commander out or something faster, but having less cards at your disposal, unless you also have a draw engine, can put you in a spot where you're going to appear threatening, not have enough in your hand to back it up, and they get knocked down a peg and you might not be able to get back.
Though, not going to lie, I have in fact cast Paco off of a Lion's Eye Diamond like 3 times now at CDH.
Yeah, and CDH is one thing, and also like, Paco is in and of itself a card draw engine, because you're exiling cards from other people's decks that you're able to cast.
Yeah.
And something people don't really take into consideration is Paco's mid game looks very similar to its end game. Its mid game is Paco, not really much else going on, hits you to find stuff. And the end game for Paco is hits you for lethal, also finding some more stuff to finish off other people. It looks very similar in both phases, but they're two distinctly different things.
Unless you can find the pieces to like breach combo, or trying to find somebody's like Praetor Scraps to Thassa's on your own shit.
Yeah, the mid game can transition into the end game very quickly, but it still exists, and it exists until all of a sudden.
Now, the difference as well between chess and Magic is because in chess, you have the finite number of pieces. So as the game is progressing on, like as soon as you go to the middle game, you're not going back to the opening. As soon as you go to the end game, you're not going back to the middle game, because as soon as the piece is off the board, it's off. Magic is a lot more fluid because you're able to draw additional pieces. You're able to wipe the board. So the status of being in from like middle to end, you can go back to middle. Like if we're getting to a lethal board state and someone wipes the board clean with like a farewell, you're going to go back to the middle game, possibly even the developmental stage.
There's also just the fact that you can, with a whole bunch of different cards, take some of the pieces that were taken off the board and put them right back on. Say, well, I see that you took that queen. It is back and bigger than ever.
Not considering promotion. Also, there can be different mindsets of this person is in their end game, and this person is still in their middle game, and then the player who has been stuck on 2 lands is in their developmental stage. Like, you
This
could have people in different aspects of the game because we have that diversity of the different cards and randomization.
Yeah, this is also where I'd like to transition into instead of chess, because that's very much where a lot of very smart decisions lie. I'm going to make a different comparison to a game called I helped build called Cathedral. Shout out, Edward. Please listen and give me some love. Anyways, Cathedral is a style of chess where it's fantasy role playing, there's random chance, there's dice. You have the decision making actions of chess where you make individual once a turn actions, but there's different types of consequences. There's different things you can do. There is luck based in the game. And just like in Magic, there will be parts where you're in a certain phase of the game, and some of it will hinge on your draw to determine, or verbatim, just your luck to acquire the next part to get to the next step. You could be in the middle phase and be one draw from either endgame or possibly just sitting in the middle phase twiddling your thumbs.
Yeah, luck is in fact a skill. It's unfortunate, but it is.
Like, chess theory is very finite. And like you said, it differs from Magic where you can be reset to 0. Cathedral has the same concept because I've had instances where I've had almost my entire army wiped, but I came back because some lucky things happened. I transitioned into being able to defeat the enemy army in a simpler way than the approach I was going for. I took 1 unit and eliminated 12. And it had some luck. I had to plan. I had to adjust, just like we tend to do in Magic, where we have the pieces, but we have to figure out the right way to use them.
And then with this here, in chess, you have the opening game, middle game, end game. When we look at grandmasters and how much they study their game and theories, anyone want to take a guess which of these phases they spend the most time in?
I'm actually pretty sure you've told us before. I'm pretty sure it was actually the opening and not really the end game.
It's a combination of opening or middle, I believe you told me.
So it's actually the end game.
It was the opposite. My brain tricked me.
So the opening is very much on book. And when you're going against a grandmaster, the odds of them misplaying and blundering a piece is very slim. So grandmasters will spend most of the time focusing on the end game when a lot of the pieces have been eliminated off the board to make sure they're doing the best possible move, because the margin for error in the end game is so small that if you put your king in the wrong spot for one move, it can entirely blow your game. We look at this in Magic as well, that when you get to the more complex board states, the end of the game, like knowing like when I'm supposed to respond to a trigger in order to stop the combo, or what kind of evasion do I need to get around this person's blocker? What is the important piece to remove to make sure they're not as threatening as they have been? Things like that. The end game is when you need to be spending the most of your energy, time, and attention versus the early game and developmental or the middle game where we're still kind of breaking parity a little bit. So that's when you need to be on your A game, as it were.
That kind of also goes into the archetypes that are usually within Magic, because even if we can break it down to the actual types of strategies like mill, aggro, control, a lot of those get filtered into 3 different kinds of categories, which is aggro turbo as the beginning of a game, because they want to win as fast as possible. They're trying to build up as fast as possible and then go right into their end game, skipping middle.
And this is going to be your opening traps or your scholars mates or things like that in chess, where you have the players that are trying to do a riskier move to get you out of position and then take advantage early on to try to win the game as quickly as possible.
Then you move over to mid-range, which is trying to get a little bit ahead and control the aggro, but not as much as a control deck would normally do. And they live in that middle game to just find their window. The important thing with a lot of mid-range decks is that you could have that win to go for it right then and there, but you have to hold yourself back from it until you can identify your window. This is why a lot of mid-range decks can sometimes flop to like controlled decks, and I'll get to that, because they usually are still so focused on that middle game that they sometimes can't develop early enough for like the aggro decks, or aren't as developed or ahead as they need to be in the end game. And then that flows nicely into the end game for our control and stacks decks, which are primarily focusing on that end game, because they are developing for that. They're trying to make sure you have no resources available to you to win the game at the start and the outset, which is why they're usually very good against aggro decks. They can be middling on mid-range, it's depending on how that's going, because since mid-range is building on the middle, you're trying to figure out, okay, what piece do I need to get rid of right here and then, because nothing immediately stands out in a mid-range deck for a control deck. It's that weird fluctuation. But the entire point is that they're trying to build towards that end game because they are built for that end game where they have denied all of your resources. They have taken all of your options away from you. They have built up their board at that point to where they need it to be to mill you out, swing lethal, do a different kind of win condition than you were thinking of.
Yeah, and that's the reason why control can be so brutal, because if they get to a point where all of their cards are a lot more useful in that final stage, they're going to beat you because they just simply have more than you do. And that's a concept that I brought up a lot with, other players in our group, where they're wanting to do something like infect and stuff like that. Like, okay, so your cards that you're playing are going to be like all like 2 mana, 3 mana cards. You need to increase your card advantage in the deck, because in the later phases of the game, when everyone's dropping 7 and 8 drops, you need to be able to drop like 4 2-drops in a turn just to be able to keep up with the mana expenditure in order to keep yourself competitive, because your average card quality is not going to be that of an opponent player who's trying to focus on getting towards the end game.
Yeah, if you lack quality, you need quantity, and vice versa.
And that's all what control is. They are focused on the quality of what they are playing versus the quantity, which is what aggro wants. Aggro wants quantity, turbo wants quantity to get there as fast as possible, versus control stacks, which is going to be quality pieces over time.
And this is what makes cards like Vandal Blast and Cyclonic Rift, some of these overloaded cards, so good, is because in the early game, if someone drops a Winter Orb or something, you can just use 1 mana, blow it up with the Vandal Blast. Or in later game, if they're getting out of hand, you can use the 5 mana and blow up all of your opponent's artifacts. Having the ability to have a card that can be used in the developmental, middle, and end game effectively, and having an ability to scale, is really nice, because that card is going to be useful for a lot more of the game, versus if you're in the end game and you're top decking an Arcane Signet or Naturalize, it may not be as helpful for you.
Yeah, and man, do I have some stories on just how each one of those can develop. First off, you have like the aggro strategies where they're just trying to drop as many dudes to overpower you as much as possible. Or in the case of Voltron, they are trying to drop as many equipment onto one dude as possible and swing at yo ass.
I'm staring at you intently with this slicer in my hand with a hero's blade.
Look, see, here's the thing though. When I said that, I was envisioning Roger for you. I was envisioning your Rograk.
Speaking of, all of that deck's missing. Big sad.
Oh no.
I found 2 cards from it.
That's
Timna and Rodrak, the commanders, only cards that are in that deck I can find.
That's not good.
That's really not good.
Yeah, and especially considering all of its pieces are supposed to go in Slicer.
But then like on a CDH level, I literally had a game last night where it was Rograk Silas. What they did was they got all of their value mana rocks turn 1 because they were in the first seat. Wheel of Fortune.
Oh, baby.
Yeah. Wheel of Fortune taking the second seat player essentially out of the game. I lost a Mana Vault, a Jeweled Lotus, 2 lands, and like so the One Ring. The One Ring really hurt on that one. And then the 4th seat player just grinned because they had an actual playable hand still. They didn't win the game, but like Ethel.
A wheel that early in the game, because like you're mulliganing, especially in CDH, kind of aggressively to get a hand that's going to be able to get you off the ground. And then just like, we're going to have a random 7 cards. Let's hope what you can do. That's rough.
Yeah, it was very brutal. I was glad to still get Paco out turn 3.
I had a game where I was first seat. Slicer came out with the blade turn 1. Nothing is more satisfying than passing everyone a 6/6 double striker.
Yeah.
Every turn.
Well, with that, let's go ahead and transition towards the CDH version of this beginning, middle, and end game here. go ahead and lead us off.
Basically, the beginning game for all of the CDH decks are definitely going to be playing your 0 drops. You're going to try to ramp as hard as you can, depending on your strategy, to either get your commander out immediately, Roger, Silas. Usually you're getting Rograk before you're even playing a land. The very first thing you're putting is Rograk on the field, because that's a commander on your field and
Sure.
enables all of the things that say, hey, if you have your commander, this spell's free, which is going to be helpful when you are going to try and turbo win right then and there and try to shoot off an Adnos to get all your pieces.
And that's, a big part of it too, where in CDH, you have to be ready for somebody to try to go to their end game from development. Like, you can't necessarily keep a hand that doesn't have an ability to kind of scale up to prevent someone from pulling away with the game.
A lot of the decisions for your early game are also dependent on what decks you're sitting across from and what seat you're in. Seat position in CDH is extremely important, because if the Rograk Silas player is going first, you're going to want to keep a hand that has interaction that you can cast off for free to try and stop whatever they're doing, because you have no guarantee that you will see your turn off of their first turn in CDH. Versus if it's a blue farm deck in the first seat, you could sometimes keep a little bit of interaction, but you might also want to focus on building up your own board first, depending on what deck you're playing as well. Because you could also be Roger Silas sitting across from the blue farm and you want to go brr.
And I think in mid-range, of course, they're wanting to kind of control that parity and break away at some point versus, control. And sometimes control just cannot handle turbo or anything like that. They're not just fast enough to deal with it. That it is really interesting seeing that these phases matter a lot more on how much of a controlling demand you want on those, depending on what your deck strategy is.
And you usually don't see too much control as you do see stacks. Stacks is very prevalent. That's why you have like Stacks Nachila. The more common one that I played against is a mono white Myrel Stacks deck, which breaks its parity because it just keeps swinging Myrel as a 3/4 that can still just create dudes to swing everywhere. You're going to break parity somewhere because you're just going to keep building an army turn after turn after turn, and it is exponential.
I kind of like to view it as casual is your like what you're looking for in your beginning, middle, end is a number of turns, like cycles. So you can look in casual and cycle 1. Everyone's gone through their first turn. Who is doing developmental phase? Who is doing blah, 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 blah. In CDH, it's individualistic. So you check each person's development, middle, and end as they are playing, very retroactively, very immediate. It's not okay, turn 1's going to always be development. Turn 2, who is still in development? It's, okay, Roger started his turn. He played XYZ. He went straight from development to middle. I need to be aware of this. And this is all within like 2 minutes rather than 2 turns.
It is a very sped up microcosm of usually what happens in chess and in casual. It is something that you really need to pay attention to, because it can even be even more complicated in chess because there's just such a wide rule set and card interactions that are very weird, timing that you need to make sure that you get right, or else you could just totally botch what you were trying to do, because you try to remove a Yisan while they have it untapped and they have mana to activate it, and they're just gonna, in response, activate it, get a thing that protects it to, and maybe untap it as well, and then do it again in front of your face saying, haha,
they're gonna get you.
Or the funniest thing is an 8-tails just sitting there and you go, I want a sword.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to move on to our draft. This week, we are doing our Planeswalker Battle Royale. So the Battle Royale is just going to be if we are in an arena, we are looking at the lore specifically. This is post-mending, so none of the divine, godlike Urza type of characters. And we're going to go with that. So, of course, this is a fantasy football style. So I'm on the clock first, Joe, then Jacoby, Joe, then myself. So kind of a snake draft back and forth. I am starting here on the clock, and I am looking at my options. So this week I have 5 rounds I can work with. So I'm keeping that in mind. But the main issue I have is this is a deep pool of different options I can pick from for Planeswalkers. and 4 of them are going to come off the board before I get to pick again. So whoever I pick here at 101 needs to be a powerhouse in and of themselves. Fortunately, I think that there's a clear 101 in this advice here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pick Nico Bolas, aka Nikki B, as my number 1 overall. As we've seen multiple planeswalkers trying to take out him on at once and sometimes not even succeeding, I think he's going to be the backbone of my team to work off of.
Certainly fair. Big bag of magic, and it would take an entire team. But he also had a team with him with that team that went against him. So team on team, he still lost.
That's true, but I think from a number 1 overall, that's my guy. That's who I'm starting with.
I mean, certainly fair. Certainly fair.
All right, Joe, you're on the clock.
So I'm pulling my Wooburg shenanigans once again and pulling the only Wooburg planeswalker that's legal, and it's Jared Carthalion.
Okay.
Jared Carthalion has been one of the more prominent characters in Magic's history, and his card certainly leads credence to power and increasing the power of everyone around him, especially enhancing their colors, enhancing their powers, and he just being a powerhouse himself. He's going to get you.
That's fair. Jacoby, it's on you.
So, as the adverse to you, my dear friend, I am picking a Johnny.
Okay.
Because on the antithesis of Nicol Bolas being a badass, a Johnny is the only one who got so mad he ran up and said, "Square up and 1v1 me right now," and almost beat his ass to a standstill. Just literally enough rage. Cat turned from mono white to red white real fast.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute meat stick at the time. And in a lot of history.
That is
Also
true.
became a Phyrexian boy.
That's why you wanted him.
No. That's just a bonus.
All right. So Nico Bolas, Jared Carthalion, and Johnny are off. Jacoby, you are starting us with round 2.
Round 2 is Garruk.
Yep.
Garrick, okay.
I mean, if you're going to be going against planeswalkers, Garruk's a good choice.
Just gonna point this out there. We're talking a smackdown. Garruk's like over 8 feet tall and he's nothing but meat.
Yeah. And before, when he was cursed, was just smacking down planeswalkers left and right like they were nothing.
Literally became titled the apex predator.
Yeah, he is definitely a beast. I'm very sad that he did not make it to my pick, but one of my 2 that I did not think were going to be there are going to be there, so I'm pretty excited about that. Joe, go
Well,
ahead.
I mean, I may choose it, but I also may not. Because,
There's 2, so you pick one, I'll get the other. It's great.
Yeah, because I think that if we're talking about a good, cool ability to increase other people's powers, I'm thinking Sarkhan Vol to turn other planeswalkers into goddamn dragons and just all of the synergies that come along with that. I would love to see Jared Carthalion increase Sarkhan Vol and Sarkhan Vol just immediately turning him into another dragon.
Sarkhan Vol is definitely a good one, but that was not the one I was thinking. So,
Not either of them?
not either of them.
Well, it seems
Wow.
like you're getting both of them on the turn.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. First one is I've got one half of the equation here. I'm about to get the other half of the equation. I'm picking Ugin.
Yep.
I'm going to get both dragons here. I'm very excited about that because that was one person I thought could go toe-to-toe with Nico Ball, so getting them off the board and keep it on my side. Double dragon to start out my draft. Very excited with that. And then also, I want to get in people's heads. I want to be psychological warfare, and there's no one better to do that than Jace Bellerin. So I'm going to go Ugin and then Jace to complete my round 3 here. So I've got Nico Bolas, Ugin, and Jace to start out.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I go with my heart and my gut to tell me exactly what I need. And that means that my third pick is Saheeli Rai. We are going with one half of Dinobots because, man, Saheeli loves creating copy constructs of actual creatures, other artifacts, just pure value town. Because her copies are full copies. She's going to copy other planeswalkers at this rate and just be like, oh, hey, I see you got a cool team over there. It's on our side now.
Fair enough, fair enough. I'm kind of surprised. Under the same geist that a Johnny got his pick, I'm going with Sorin. Simply because, again, the antagonist comes onto this plane, realizes he's in Sorin's domain and goes, nope, and immediately leaves because he is afraid Sorin will stab him to death. Again, anything that turns a dragon that's been living to eons into a, nope, goodbye, I leave, who's like, I am the antithesis of the multiverse. And then a little boy with some swag, some fangs, and a sword is sitting there, and he goes, but I don't mess with that guy. Good enough for me. Definitely for a beatdown.
Yeah, definitely fair.
And then for my 4th pick, I'm kind of struggling here, but I'm going to go with the Master of Flowers.
Oh, Bahamut in disguise.
Bahamut in disguise. Another dragon, but you don't realize he's a dragon until it's too late as far as lore goes.
Yeah, part of Swingwalkers.
An Archon of Good until you suddenly realize the Archon of Good is a giant dragon.
Love me some Swingwalkers. Why do you think I chose Sarkhan Vol?
That's fair. So, Jacoby, it is Ajani, Garrick, Soren Morkov, and Bahamut, aka Master of Flowers. Joe, you've already taken Jared Carthelion, Sarkhan Vol, and Saheeli Rai. You are on the clock.
Well, if I got one half of Dinobots, I gotta get the other with Watley, especially with the mastery over dinosaurs. You bring in Watley to be like, hey, yo, Gashath, you want to square up? And you could see a whole bunch of planeswalkers be like, yo, what's that? Oh my God, that's a giant dinosaur. If Watley brings in more giant dinosaurs and Saheeli can make copies of them, it's going to be a rough battle, regardless of how powerful the other side is.
That is definitely fair. Now I'm at my pick here after you've selected Watley and Saheeli Rai, Sarkhan Vol, Jared Carthelion. I've got Nico Bolas, Ugin, and Jace. I've got 4 and 5 here, so this will be my last 2 picks. I want to make sure I can round out my team here. First thing is I've got the sheer muscle with having 2 dragons on my team. I'm able to affect people's minds. Now I want to affect time, much to the chagrin of Jacoby. I am going to pick up Teferi.
Yep.
The Master of Time.
Imagine the guy who can manipulate time being the last pick for someone.
But fortunately, I've got my round 5. That's totally okay. I think with this pick here, I'm looking at a lot of different options of different places I can go. I think that I want to have... There are some people on the board that I definitely have a lot of respect for. I think I'm going to go Liliana.
Okay.
Because she still has the chain veil. I think that she's definitely someone who could have taken over a lot of the zombie army from Nico Bolas, so having it on the same side for an enhancement rather than having to deal with someone counteracting that. I think that rounds out the board pretty well. I've got some flying, I've got some mental, I've got time manipulation, I've got necromancy. I think it's a pretty well-rounded out team here. So yeah. I'm going to end up with Liliana as my last pick.
And so I then have to go into the monk herself, Narset, because, oh boy, if we have Sarkhan turning people into dragons, we have Jared pumping up everybody based off of their abilities. We have the combination Dinobots to bring in dinosaurs with a steel chair, and the steel chair just being, oh, one of your players on your side. Then Narset is gonna make sure that they get beefier, and especially after each spell that they cast. Plus, monks really good at hand-to-hand.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's very fair. Well,
all right, last pick, Jacoby.
I'm going to go an unexpected pick. I don't think either of you would have expected. I'm going to pick Tyvar.
No, I expected that.
Really?
It was on my list, but
Yeah.
I didn't want Tyvar. I wanted Narset.
Well, I wanted Tyvar because nothing says go f yourself like the fact that you canonically in lore but never on the cards hear about Tyvar beating the bricks off of portables.
Yeah, especially with the arms that he has.
Yeah, he just literally got a hex gold arm blade, just ran him through and is just like, nah, I'm done with you.
All right.
Be gone, foul demon.
Yeah, I think at one point he actually ripped off the tail and started beating him with his own tail.
Yeah, and then also, unironically, squared up with my number 1 pick, a Johnny on New Phyrexia as well. It was like, I'll fight, you want some too? Like, come and get it.
Now, who are the runners-up that we all would want?
One that I definitely had. I didn't really want to pick this person because having Teferi, I felt like it was kind of a hat on a hat. But Aminatu, be able to control fate, but also sending like an 8-year-old child into battle seemed like a really bad thing to do.
Hey, child, go fight these other 5 walkers.
Let me go get my butterflies. Like, what are we doing? But yeah, Aminatu was definitely on there for me. Gideon was definitely a good out choice if I just had to pick up like some sheer muscle.
Oh, so we're doing 2 runners up this time.
Sure.
Okay. Like, at that point, if we're doing 2 runners up, then of course I got to choose the Wanderer and Kaido Suzuki.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's fair.
Shizuki.
I mean,
I
honestly,
misplaced that H.
honestly, like there's enough good planeswalkers out there. We could have done this draft all over and still had a full draft and been fine.
Yeah,
Yep.
like the Wanderer and Kaito are absolutely great. The Wanderer just literally slashes things more giant than her and can do a nothing personnel kid because of her Planeswalker spark. And Kaito just being a ninja assassin.
Yeah, absolutely. My two runner-ups were Hatali and Elspeth.
Hatali?
Hatali. She controls the dinos, my man.
He
No,
drafted
I literally drafted her.
I know.
Wow.
It was one of the runner-ups I wanted. You took her from me.
Fair enough.
Like on the list of things I wish I could have picked.
Huatley.
Yeah, whatever.
But
You
like,
had 2 picks after I chose Saheeli, though.
Yeah, but I had more important picks.
definite runner up. Just because she controls the ground. Nahiri,
Yeah.
the core, because like there is lore of her just absolutely handing Soren his face.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think she would have been a fantastic run up for me as well. I just was not expecting Liliana to get to round 5. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. There's a lot of really cool characters in this game, and hopefully if we get the TV show, we can have some of these characters put into life, get voice acting behind them, animation, be awesome.
Yes. Some good voice acting.
I just digitally Joe sliding his business card through the multiverse to get it over to Wizards.
I mean, I handed my voice acting business card over in Chicago along with our podcast business card. I was handing out 2 business cards at a
friends.
time.
You know who I'm surprised neither of you picked or even had an honorable mention? Oko.
I was thinking about Oko, but I already had like Jace. So I've already doing some like mind manipulation. I don't think I necessarily needed a shapeshifter, but if I didn't get Jace, he definitely would have been on my list.
No, I did think about Oko because elked.
Yeah, I was gonna say
elked.
like have all the muscle you want, elk.
That's a really powerful elk you have.
It's just every single elk has like their one thing. Like the Garuk elk just has a helmet, but it's still just an elk.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have this week. Does anyone have any closing thoughts before we break out here?
Stop hating on strategies. Just learn to get good.
That's not even a thought, but all right.
It was, in fact, a thought. It came out and became a speech into the microphone.
It was a sound.
Wow.
All right. That's all the time we have this week. Thank you for listening in. See you next time.
Take care.
Bye.